Continuing Tanny's travels to convince her that trips in the car do not mean trips to the vet, we went next to a local campsite in the grounds of Sandringham House, the Norfolk residence of the late Queen Elizabeth II. On this occasion we went in the van with the idea of using it as the base for trips out as well as sleeping in it overnight. This breaks from the previous journeys where we have spent time in the hosts' houses, so we're nice and warm. The weather forecasts did not indicate dawn to dusk sunshine, but insisted that we would be rained on at least some of the time. On arrival at the campsite, I chose a pitch that was as remote as possible and under some tall Scots pine trees, so if it did rain we were sheltered to a certain extent. After the evening meal, I set up the bed and had to scramble to make sure I got at least a portion of it that wouldn't mean my having to contort round Tanny. After a few chapters of the book I was reading, lights out and doze off. The next morning was perfect for a long walk into the grounds of Sandringham House through some of the pine and beech woods that had been planted over the years by past members of the royal family. But as I was trying to persuade her to get out of the van, she stood on the end of the bed, shaking with fright, she wasn't cold, and wouldn't move. I sat with her and tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having any of it. So after half an hour or so, I decided that I wasn't going to force her into anything she didn't want. So I started to pack everything up to make our way home. I was just winding the electricity cable up, when all of a sudden she was out of the van and looking at me as if to say, "What? Going home already? We've only just arrived." I grabbed the lead and wallet and started walking. It turned out to be a lot longer than the 2 kilometres I had been told it was, so by the time we reached the cafe we were both hungry, so made the most of 2 sausage rolls for us both and a piece of shortbread for me. The walk back started well until Tanny suddenly dashed off into the woods without any obvious reason. I followed her along a small path and saw a deer running away into the trees, so I guessed my hound had smelled something interesting and decided to investigate. We then spent a jolly 15 minutes or so going round and round the copse of trees as if we were starring in a Benny Hill sketch, with neither of us finding the other. Eventually I saw her in the distance, back on the main path, which I was grateful for, as she can be remarkably deaf when she chooses. On the lead we walked back, dried off and warmed up in the back of the van. The next morning I thought it would be fun to explore the closest beach, as Tanny hasn't been to the seaside as far as I know, and I wanted to see how she enjoyed it. This time there were no nerves, so we had a quick walk round the campsite and then packed up for the drive to the beach. Once there I saw, to my satisfaction, that there were only 2 or 3 people around and only 1 dog, so I felt safe to let Tanny off the lead. Once she had got the idea of what the beach was, with the different areas of shingle, soft dry sand, and then the hard wet sand down by the waves, she was off. I struggled to find a term to describe her colour, as it's a mix of tan, dark brown and flecked with black, not to mention the patches of white around her muzzle, the indication of her age. Now I realised that Snettisham beach sand was the ideal name for her colour, as on more than one occasion she disappeared against the beach, so closely did her fur match the sand. Round and round and round and round and round and bump.